And welcome back to Open Studio. Okay, more. Yeah. So I tipped my hand to the past few episodes. I've mentioned that I'm recording all of these all at once. So I don't have, it's not like I pre-mixed the paint up before each episode and then I started the camera. I literally am running one episode behind another. I'm getting ready. We have a couple trips coming up and I want to make sure that the content is continuous through the times that I'm going to be bouncing around, which is why I'm pre-recording a lot of it. So if it seems like, I just grab an airbrush when I start up and there's paint in it, it's because I never emptied it from the episode right before. All right, so a little bit of blue there where that gray paint kind of still showing through. All right, so back to that same burnt umber color, and I'm going to start up here. So I'm getting to the point now with these details that I can start like getting close to finishing them. So I want to kind of focus on one area and kind of get it as finished as I can before moving on. Just trying to think if there is one more painting in this series that I haven't finished yet. That's right. There were 5 paintings originally in this series, and this is I guess this would be number 4 by when I started it. So 5 I also started. And it's another car show type of thing, except this was an outdoor event and it was in the summertime, and a pair of old Fords just kind of hanging out. And so I started that painting too. That's the last one in this series. And the only thing that makes these a series is that A, I used the HD stencil for all of them, and B, I talked about it before. These are really weird, funky size because of the terrible frames that I got. And the frames, the quality isn't bad of the frames. It's the sizing that was terrible. Whoever built those frames was hopefully fired. Again, these are supposed to be 5x7 frames, and when they came in, they were just a completely weird size. So I haven't used that company since. But I also decided, because I had to wait for those frames, I didn't send them back because it was an easy enough adjustment to me at that point to resize the paintings and just use the frames. So I shouldn't make it sound like I'm never going to use them again. Because it's not fair. Everyone has a bad day. And I didn't give them the opportunity to make it right either. I never called them or sent them a message. So I certainly wouldn't. I love, I hope that people give me a chance to fix a problem that they may have with something that I have done. And I, like I said, I did not give them a chance to do that. So I'll probably place another order and just see how it goes. If the second one comes in wrong, then we will move on from them. So, but they came recommended to me, which is usually a good sign. But it just, for whatever reason, like I said, having a bad day or whatever. And I mean, it isn't even, like I said, what is this thing? It isn't even like like they just sent me like I ordered 5x7 and they sent me 8x10. Yeah, this is 4.5 inches across. So it was supposed to be the floater frame for a 5-inch wide painting, so all the way out to here. And then what's even weirder is it's not proportional either. So height-wise, it was off by just, you can't see it. This is this panel that I had to cut down to make it fit the frame is 6 7/8. So I had to cut 1/8 of an inch off the bottom of this panel and 1/2 inch off the side. So it wasn't even like a regular, it didn't make any sense at all. It was bizarre. So anyway, that's my framing woe story. Now, since I ordered this though, the reason why I ordered it from a company, just a company that was recommended, was because at the time when I was getting ready to put this series together, Ampersand, which is the maker of this board here, the clay board, they have a fantastic floater frame, different kinds. But they didn't offer anything as small as 5x7, which was a bummer because I love their frames, but I couldn't get a frame for it, so I had to go somewhere else. Now they do offer a frame for they do offer a frame for the 5x7s, which is awesome. All right, so I'm tempted to just, yeah, I am going to do this. We got the palette cam on, so that's good. I try not to get sucked into the, you know, everything has to be airbrushed or everything has to be paintbrushed or whatever. But it's funny when you're working with one of the tools or the other tool, you tend to I try to do everything with that tool, and I don't know why. You just get into a groove, I guess. But the seam that's between the box and the tank here is really, really fine. So instead of, you know, just keep hammering it with the airbrush and trying to get it right, I'll just drop it in with the paintbrush and it'll be right. Since I got the paintbrush out now and I've got the paint mixed up, just run around and hit any other really tight details that need to be done. So edge of this box here. This color that I'm pulling from right here is just burnt umber and black. So it's the same exact color. The cable here will be last. So that goes on the very end. So this way I don't care if I get paint on it or, you know, it won't matter because I'm going to repaint it anyway. I want to try to avoid it. Again, same reason. You know, I can see where it is now. It makes it really easy to paint in when it comes time. So if I just paint completely over it, I'll lose it, and then I gotta cut a stencil for it. So if I try to avoid it, that's usually a better way to go. It's really dark there, but that's something different. So again, I know I mentioned it a bunch of times how I'm pre-recording these. So I'm doing 6 of them in a row. And this is the most continuous I've worked on this painting since I started it. Because I have been doing them 1 or maybe 2 episodes at a time and then posting them up. But this one is 6 of them all in a row. And it's like, it's actually been really nice being able to work on this like continuously. Because it's always like, you do a half an hour and then I got to stop. Or do an hour, you know, 2 episodes and then I got to stop. But I really want to work on that. So this has been nice. I love having multiple projects going at once too. It just, because you get, especially if it's a long haul painting, I tend to get kind of burnt out on it after a little while. Especially if it's monotonous like this, the whole rusty thing. It's great and everything, but if I had to spend, you know, 20 hours doing it in a row, by the end of it, I'd be like ready to punch myself in the face. So it's nice having different paintings going on that have different things going. Like one's real shiny, or one's a landscape, and one's a bike, and you know, they're all different. That just makes it so much easier to kind of stay engaged with everything. And it really does keep the work going too, you know, instead of like a painting like this would take me, you know, 35, 40, 50 hours, something like that. That demands a lot of studio time, and it would mean that there wasn't going to be too much posted live or posted because I'm all constantly working on the same painting. But by having different paintings going at the same time, where they're all at different stages, there's more than likely going to have 1 or 2 that are going to be done at any given time, while others are kind of dragging on. So that's really nice as far as being able to keep things kind of pumping out there. Excuse me. You can't see it off the side. When I clean off my brush, I will show you. I have all my dirty clothes on, my painty clothes, so you're going to have to excuse my painty clothes. But what I'm doing, there's the palette, and there is, I'll back it up a little bit and lighten it up. So that, I should lighten that up a little bit because we're not in the zone of, oops, there we go. And I'll focus so you can see it. Come back to me. Oh, I'm sorry, I know what I'm doing. I'm not doing the right thing. Good. So, what is going on? I know what I did. Things. Oh boy. There we go. I only took every button. Anyway, so these are the rinse out pots for stop with that. Hold on. I don't know why it's doing that. All right, these are the rinse out pots for the Visionaire. So there are two here. So there's the holder for the spray pot, which I don't use, but I like the thing. So I have this little stuff bowl that I just kind of leave there. So all the little bits and pieces that I don't want to lose go there. And then this is just a regular mixing cup, and these are nice because they fit right in here. And what I do is I put a little bit of water on the bottom, and this is what I rinse out my brush with on the side. So just in case you hear that and don't know what the heck is going on there, that is going on. Yeah, no, that was fun because I ended up giving you the camera menu and all kinds of goofy stuff. So let's get this back to normal. That's good. Excellent. Good. Good. Ah, that's the button I forgot. Okay. Let's let that focus up. Okay. Sorry about the tour. I thought that was going to go a lot smoother than it did. Oh, well. All right. So now back to the airbrush. So I've got all those tighter lines in there now, so I'm doing good. Actually, I'm going to move you guys a little bit more because you guys are right in front of me. Move it over here a little bit. And we'll slide in a little bit more like that for you so you can see what's going on in these tighter areas. I want to make sure that we are focused. This focusing is good. Okay. All right. Yeah, the tighter areas are in now, so now I can just start concentrating on those really darker areas. So the Micron C is a good choice for this particular color because it has a slightly larger nozzle opening, and it's all relative. It is super tiny, but compared to the B, the other smaller brush, this one can handle a little bit thicker paint better than the B can. The B tends to work better with paint you can really over reduce and get super thin. And then it's a monster. It just does such a great job at super tight detail. This one is, again, will produce amazingly tight detail, but the advantage is it will allow you to do that with a little bit thicker paint. So, I mean, I could run my whole studio with this one brush. You know, it's really, really versatile. It can do a lot of really cool things. But again, there's just something wonderful about, you know, having it an instance where you need just the maximum amount of detail, and that B is it. That B is just, it's a rock star. It's crazy. But on the other side of that, if I put this color in the B, yeah, it's going to work for a little bit, but it's going to clog twice as often. It's just going to keep clogging up because, again, it's like trying to pull a really thick material through a really small opening. It just doesn't want to do it. You see how dark this gets? I mean, if you really, really like build it up, it gets to be like this, well, like everything else, you know, really, 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 really dark. And hopefully you can see why having that orange and the blue in here at this point is really important, because I'm covering all that. You know, I'm just kind of using the brown to go over all that, and those little, you know, like the little tiny speckled details of rust that are on that blue. As I finish this, you can see if I didn't have the blue in there, if I tried to go put the blue in after, it just would sit on top and it would make a mess, and it's not fun. It's not the way I want to do it. You can also see me every once in a while, I'll just aim the airbrush up and just like kind of blast out the paint, just blow it out a little bit. There's another way to do that too, a little bit, if you know, you want to really maintain it a lot. So say I'm doing all these really, really super tight details. That's when the brush is going to clog up, because you have a tiny, tiny amount of paint coming out, and then a lot of air. So it's gonna tip dry. That's what's gonna happen. So a good way to do that, instead of just kind of going off the page and blasting it, is I can go down to an area like this that has just a lot of that area, and I can kind of pull the trigger back pretty far and just kind of move anything out that's kind of stuck in there. You know, it's not a lot by any stretch. Same thing up in here, like this whole area in here is dark, so I can really kind of lean back on this and spray it out. So that helps to keep everything moving. What's going to be the end game for airbrush artists is a UV curable paint. So what I mean is, if you had a paint that never dries unless it's UV cured, you know, you have a UV light on it to cure it and harden it up, then you wouldn't get tip dry, because you have a paint. The only reason paint tip dries is because it's drying. It's drying on the tip of the airbrush. So if you had a paint that never dried, it always stayed wet until you did something to it, like hit it with UV, then that's going to be the only way you're not going to have any tip dry on an airbrush. Now, that being said, that would be a really difficult paint to operate with. I'd have to rework everything that I do, because I rely on the paint now. That paint is dry on there. I rely on that. Imagine painting, and if you touched it, you'd smear it all over the place. So, yeah, I don't know. You know, I'm just happy, I guess, that the tip dry and those kind of challenges, I'm just happy that those are manageable. You know, it's like, yeah, it would be awesome if they weren't there, but physically I can't figure out how that would ever be a thing. Even if, like I said, even if you could defy physics and come up with, you know, the perfect thing, I don't know what that would be. Because, like I said, even if you could have paint that wouldn't dry until you wanted it to, I don't know. I guess what you do is you'd spray your bit. You'd have a tiny UV light that you could just hold on it and then go back to painting. Now it's dry and you don't have to worry about it. I don't know. Again, as long as it's working for me and I can kind of fight through the stuff that I need to fight through, I'm okay. I'm happy with it. But yeah, it always makes me laugh when someone says, "Yeah, I got this paint. There's no tip dry." I'm like, if there's no tip dry, then how is it drying at all on your painting? It just you're not being honest right now. Now, some paints don't dry as much as others do, tip dry, but they all dry. Yeah, it's coming out good. Yeah, I love no surprises. So as of filming this episode, there's a whole bunch of really fun things that are happening in the airbrush industry. A couple companies have new buildings. So Badger Airbrush has just moved after being in the same location. They can correct me, but I thought I heard that they were in the same location for like 50 years, just outside of Chicago. So they're still just outside of Chicago, but they've got a new building, and that's really, really exciting. Iwata Medea over in Portland also has a new building, which is great. Coast Airbrush is in the process of getting a new building too. And all these things are great news because it means that we're growing, that people are still airbrushing and there's a demand for it. It's still one of the most efficient ways to put a liquid onto another surface. There's just, it's just the way to do it. So I think for that reason, it's always going to be around. It's always going to be like a paintbrush. It's always going to be a need for it, which makes me very happy because I like using it, and to know things are growing is good. So we're going to have to get to the point where I put a little bit of black on this too, but that's going to be the very last stage. So I want to get as much of that darker color as I can with this first before I lean on the black, because the black is really, really strong. It'll dump that color down really, really quickly. So I want to make sure that I stretch this color out as far as I can before I just kind of pop in those last little bits of detail with the light color and also with the black. And I kind of use that as a rule of thumb. The more intense the color is, the less of it I have on here. So things like, pure white and pure black, they're the strongest colors, or strongest, they have the most impact, when you have a really super bright color, really strong, vibrant color. So their impact is gigantic, so that's why they usually don't have a whole lot of them, a whole lot of it on here. But getting to this point, it's really like, again, it's that avalanche thing. I'm like looking at this when I started all the rust, and I'm like, that's going to take forever. But really now, it's this whole section is really only going to take about 2 hours, which is nice. There is room for it, so I'm going to do it because I need to. Some of these little rust spots are very pronounced. They're very sharp, so I'm going to put some of those in now. It's primarily a dry brush technique, so I don't want a whole bunch of paint on here like there is. Oops. So it's pretty much a dry brush technique where I'm just kind of, the brush is real dry and it gives me a real kind of a rough dot, essentially. But that's what I want. I want it to be kind of sharp edged, but I don't want it to be like, super geometric, really smooth or anything. I want it really organic. And I can do this across the board. Dry brushing also will make the thin paint inherently more opaque as well. So if I'm dry brushing, it's going to go on a little bit darker than if I have it, really thinned out. So it's a good note to keep in the back of your head as you're doing this, because you go and grab a really dry brush full of paint and it's going to be, but in this case, it's going to be almost black, which I don't want that. I just want to start to indicate the sharper edges of those rusty areas. That's lovely. Good. And always lean back. So I'll lean you guys back right now. You can see it. So I always kind of take a step back here. Sorry. There we go. So take a step back and kind of look at the whole thing overall to make sure that I'm heading in the right direction and I don't go too dark or leave it too light or whatever. And that's still working out really well. Okay. Okay. Now that I've got those paintbrush bits in there, I can go back in and hit the airbrush over it, and that will give me that, you know, it'll blend them together, the paintbrush and the airbrush. I also say this all the time too, you know, you play to the strengths of the tool that you're using. So the paintbrush can get super fine, the airbrush can get very fine but not as fine. So, you know, the paintbrush doesn't blend as well as the airbrush. So you kind of do as much as you can with each and then bridge the gap between the two, and what you're hopefully left with is just exactly what you want, you know, the image as you want it. So remember, you know, as I'm putting the blue in, I hit the blue a little bit harder, you know, but put it in a little bit stronger and a little bit wider than it really needed to be. And this is the reason. So as I'm kind of tucking in all this detail, now I could say, okay, yeah, the blue is great, but there's too much of it. Well, I knew there was too much because I put too much of it in there. But now what I can do is I can really just lightly go over with that umber color, and it just tones down any of the extra blue. It just kind of gets rid of it. So again, it's so much easier to do that than to say, oh man, I didn't have enough blue on there. Because if that's the case, then I got to spray this with blue again and do all those steps on top of it again. You know, it's just a drag. So I'd rather have more of that underneath color than I need, because it's always easier to adjust it away. Okay. There's not a whole lot of paintbrush work on the tank itself. It seems to be the rust is much smoother, which is good. You can feel this paint starting to bind up. Again, the way I can tell that is I have to pull the trigger back a little bit farther each time to get paint to come out, because it's getting thicker and thicker. So I got to really, like, it's still usable by a long shot. It's not like I have to flush it out. But now is when I start really kind of keeping track of it. You know, I don't want to get it to the point where I really have to pull the trigger back to get paint to come out, because then I'm asking for it. I really am. Because I'll be doing that. I'll be trying to pull it out to get that last little bit, and all the paint will come out all at once, and you'll end up with this giant spider web everywhere. So. I love that dent. I'm so happy it's there. It just has so much character. Like, what happened? Like, first of all, it's got a sidecar on it. I don't know if it always had a sidecar on it, but how do you get a dent there if there's a sidecar on it? It won't fall over. I mean, it might have not had the sidecar on it at one point and then just kind of dumped over. But again, there's such a story there. Like, again, this bike is 100 years old, right? And at no point in this bike's history did anyone ever say, you know what, I got to fix that dent in the tank. It went 100 years. Now, I could be wrong. That could have happened in the 60s. And, you know, it wasn't, or whatever. Gosh, it has such a long history. It could have happened anywhere. Or it could have happened recently. I don't know, you know, and then it just rusted over. Such a story, which is so cool. Or it could have been a wartime bike, you know. It could have made it, well, probably not, but I don't know, maybe. Yeah, this area between the letters is really pretty dark. So, all right, so at this point now with the letters, I've got them kind of where I can see them. So that's all I really need. So now where I was kind of being careful before with the darker brown, I can kind of go over the whole thing now because I got to get between these letters with this darker color. So even as I darken all the whole area around this, I can obviously still see the lettering. So I'll be able to pull all that back out. It's just at the beginning, if I did this in the beginning with the lighter brown and then, you know, blasted over the whole thing with the darker brown, you wouldn't be able to see the lettering. Now, in this case, it's not a terrible loss because I could just cut out a template for it and drop them back in. But again, it's just going to be easier to see where they are from the HD stencil when it comes time to put them in for real. All right, I think that's a good spot to stop here. I'll back you guys up a little bit so you can see what we're doing. And that's where we're at so far. So again, see every step, man, every half hour it gets a little bit closer to being done. And then we're left with just the motor down the bottom, which is really, really exciting. So the motor is pretty technical, but we'll get through it, and that's what I got. All right, so hit that like and subscribe for me if you feel so inclined. And I am Steve Leahy. This is Open Studio. I'll catch you all on the next one. Thanks a lot, guys.